Should be live. You have to speak pretty closely. About this close. I think that's pretty.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out to the Seed today. I just wanted to let you guys know that we're selling raffle tickets today for a lot of great prizes. We have a Breville juicer, we have a Vitamix, we have so many great raffle prizes. The tickets are $5 for one ticket, or five for 20, and all proceeds go directly to Farm Animal Sanctuary. So be sure to go over and check out all the cool prizes. And now I would like to introduce Matt Frazier, author of the book and blog Know Me Athlete. Thanks, guys.
All right, hi everybody. Am my volume good? Okay, if I get too quiet or too something, let me know. So yeah, my name is Matt Frazier. I'm the author of the blog Know Me Athlete and now the book by the same name. And I'm going to talk for half an hour or so today. I kind of learned on a book tour I did last fall that the most fun part of these things for me and the audience is the Q&A part. So I'll keep it to half an hour or so roughly, and then we can do that for the rest of the hour or however long you guys have questions. So speaking of the book tour, was anyone here at my book tour talk in New York last fall? Nobody. Excellent, because this talk is identical to that one, so that's a good thing. It's not quite identical, but it's close. And the reason is because a lot of it's based on my story. And I like to tell my story, not because it's about my favorite person, but because it's, people get the wrong idea about me because of the name of my site and my book, which is kind of good. People think that I'm an elite athlete. They want to put me in the realm of Scott Jurek, Brendan Brazier, Rich Roll, when I'm not that at all. Like I get introduced often at these things as the Know Me Athlete, as if like I'm the guy who is the picture of a vegan athlete. And that's really not what my whole thing's about. Like my shtick online is about me being the normal guy, the guy who is not a gifted athlete, hated running all his life, someone who running didn't really come easy to. And that's, I think, why it works, because my stuff is sort of like, I'm a normal guy, but I have done some things that I guess are abnormal, like taking a ton of time off my marathon and running a 100-miler last summer, my first one. But the whole point of it is like, if I can do this and I'm not an elite gifted athlete, then you can do it too. That's the entire point of my thing. So as I was saying, I just did not like running as a kid. I dreaded the gym class mile run each day. It was just the worst day I could imagine. I hated it. And I quit sports teams. Like I was on a lacrosse team for a few weeks, or I don't know how long it was. But I quit because I hated the running. And I just thought it was awful and it wasn't fun. And I didn't want to do that. And I didn't even think at all about fitness, aside from just basic, baseball, golf kind of sports, until I got to college, when some friends and I got really heavily into like weightlifting, as a lot of college guys do. We wanted to bulk up and put on muscle and impress everybody. As you can see, I've done a fantastic job of doing that. But anyway, I actually was good. I was fairly successful at it. Did put on a lot of weight. Probably not the healthiest way, because I was not even close to vegetarian or vegan back then. But we were really competitive about it, and we held ourselves to a really high standard, my friends and I. And one day, one of them came home. One of my roommates came back and said, "Hey guys, I got this idea. Let's try to lose some fat," because we had added all this fat along with adding muscle, which happens. Let's do this, and let's train for a half marathon, because we'll lose fat, get fit, it'll be a cool challenge. So, of course, because we were like, one guy had to always keep up with the other guy, it was like, yeah, we'll do that. And then someone said, let's do a full marathon, actually, instead of the half. So, of course, everyone else, yes, let's do this. And it was a great idea, except that none of us had ever run 3 miles in our entire lives. So it was a big thing. And we decided to do it. And we said, OK, let's go sign up for a marathon. But we were such non-runners that we didn't even know the name of a marathon to sign up for. It was like, who can think of a marathon? And then we'll go look it up on the internet. So, of course, when you get 3 non-runners and you say, what's the name of a famous marathon, we came up with the Boston Marathon. So us 3 non-runners went onto the internet, went to the Boston Marathon website, fully prepared to sign up for the Boston Marathon. And we found out very quickly that you can't just sign up for the Boston Marathon. You have to actually qualify. And for us, being males under 35 back then, it was a 3-hour and 10-minute time to get in, which is 7 minutes and 15 seconds per mile. So not like an elite fast, because the elites are running that in close to 2 hours. but still a pretty darn good achievement for ordinary people. So we figured we could run 1 or 2 7:15 miles. So over the course of a training, we should naturally be able to get up to 26 of them. And we decided for a different marathon, but we said what we want to do is qualify for Boston in this marathon. Like, we didn't like that we weren't allowed to get into this thing. So we went onto the San Diego Rock and Roll Marathon, found their website, and this was back in 2002, and filled out all the stuff, like the T-shirt size and your address and all this stuff, and got to the very last question on the form. It said, "What's your anticipated finish time?" So of course, I had no idea that this was like going to be a turning point in my life filling this out, but we put in 3:10:00 as our estimated finish time for this first marathon any of us have ever done. So the training didn't go great. I mean, as you would imagine, with 3 non-runners in college with all those distractions. But we did get the runs in for the most part, and we did all fly out to San Diego and made it to the start line of this race. And I don't know if I'm sure there are people here who have not done a half or a full marathon before, especially a big one. But if you go to those things, you'll see that they put you in starting corrals because they don't want the fastest runners to like run over the slowest runners. So the fastest runners are up front. Well, our 3:10 estimated finish time got us in the very first corral, number 1, in this 20,000 person race. So in front of us is like a little line you can't get past with the elite runners, the ones who were like invited and trying to win the race. And then behind us is 20,000 people. And all around us were these people who they looked like runners, and we looked around and we were like, we don't look anything like these people. What are we doing here? And that was really the first time that we had this idea that like this was a ridiculous idea of us to think that we were going to qualify for Boston here. So we took off running, and the next 4 hours and 53 minutes were some of the most painful of my entire life, like really way worse than the 100-miler that I did. This was way, way beyond that in terms of pain. But we all did finish, which was cool. Although we kind of learned a lesson. We felt like we didn't really belong as runners, and we kind of deserved what we got. So we all flew back to Maryland, where we were from, and my friends gave up on the idea of Boston. So now, 12 years later, neither of them has done another marathon. But for some reason, and I don't know really why this was, but I just couldn't give up on it. It was just this thing where I felt like I said I was going to do this. I told everyone I was going to qualify for Boston, and I felt like I just had to do this thing. So I went home, and really for the first time in my life, started to think about like the process of setting a big goal and what that means and what it was, and wrote down on a piece of paper, like, here's where I am, here's where I want to be, and I'm going to get there, no matter how long it takes, no matter what I have to do, no matter how ridiculous it is, I am going to do this. So it turned out that how long it takes part that I wrote down on there was really important, because I had no idea that it would take me 4 years just to get back to another marathon start line. Because what happened was I discovered that as soon as I would start training for another marathon, I started having shin problems. So I'd have shin splints, they would turn into stress fractures, and it would be like 4 to 6 weeks of training that I could get in before everything would just start to go bad. And then I'd have to stop, wait a couple weeks for everything to heal, start again. And this cycle of frustration just kept on happening. So finally, after 2 years of that, still with the idea in my head, like I was going to qualify for Boston no matter what, wasn't really discouraged or anything, I went to a physical therapist friend of mine and asked him to like check me out and to see what was going on. And he looked at me and said, "Matt, you're not built to be a marathon runner. This is not your sport. Just go do something else." I mean, my legs are kind of bow shaped, which isn't that weird, but I mean, a lot of people's are. But probably, not the ideal body type of a distance runner by any means. But for some reason, I stuck with it. I didn't listen to his advice. And that kind of gets me to the very first big point of this talk. I think the reason that I didn't listen and just kept going was that this goal of mine was so outrageously big and so unrealistic by a lot of people's standards that the idea of accomplishing it just like totally seduced me. I mean, it was something where I would go to bed at night and I could not wait to get up in the morning so that it could be another day of training that I could do to get towards this goal. And when I would imagine like the type of person I'd have to be, not just physically, which was a huge leap, but also mentally, and how disciplined I'd have to be, how mentally tough I would need to be, all those things I just thought was the most appealing goal I could imagine, and I was so excited by it. So what I would want to encourage you to do, and if you have any sort of goal like this in your head. My idea is that most people probably have something where, it kind of always surfaces, this thing that you wish you could do, whether it's an Ironman or losing a certain amount of weight or lifting a certain amount of weight or, even things that are not of a physical nature at all. But I would hope that you could just kind of think of that during this talk and be open to the possibility that, maybe it's something you can do and that you shouldn't just stuff down and tell it to be quiet because it'd be embarrassing if you failed, as so many of us do. Because I really, truly believe that if you set a goal that's out there, unrealistic, but really, really exciting, that you are more likely to make that happen than a more modest goal that isn't so exciting, but just says, it's just sort of like, yeah, that would be kind of nice. And the reason I think this is when I look back at that experience with the physical therapist, had my goal been just like, okay, I did a marathon, but I want to go run another one to redeem myself and like just run a solid marathon, if that was my goal, I don't think I would have made it, first of all, 2 years of cycling through this terrible frustration with the shin problems. And then I think once the physical therapist said, you are not meant to be a marathoner, go pick a different sport, that would have been it. I think I would have said, fine, like this isn't for me. But because that Boston goal was so exciting, and because I had like every run I'd done, every easy run, at some point in the run, I would close my eyes as safely as possible and just sort of like envision myself in the last 0.2 of my qualifying race and looking up at the clock and seeing that I've got 2 minutes to spare and, I've done it. And I would like bring myself to tears thinking about this just kind of on my runs. And I had just done that so many times that by the time this 2 years passed and he said, you're not meant to be a runner, stopping wasn't an option. Like it was something I was going to do no matter what. And I had kind of driven the grooves of that so deeply just by picturing it and being so excited by it that, in some sense, it was inevitable back then. So that's the power to me of a really, really big goal. And, like with any goal, anything that's worth doing, there are going to be obstacles that come up, assuming it's something that you need to go for. I mean, like taking out the trash or something, you don't need to go for that. You just go do it because there's nothing that prevents you from getting it done. But if you have something that's requiring you to say, this is a goal, I'm not here yet, but I want to get here, then almost by definition, there are obstacles between you and that achievement. So if obstacles are going to come up, no matter the size of the goal, you're going to have 3, 4, 5, who knows how many, you might as well have one that's really exciting so that you're going to keep going and that those obstacles aren't going to say, you're not going to say, oh, well, that's enough, I'm not going to try anymore, because the goal is just so exciting to you. So that's the first big point here. And what I did was I went back to running and just kind of doubled down on looking up things, researching things, reading books, trying to find whatever I possibly could that would teach me how to start running without injury and then eventually get faster from there. So I did finally find 2 keys that really changed everything for me. And I don't want this talk to be like all about running, so I don't want to spend too long on them, but we can talk about it in the Q&A. But just very quickly, what they were was learning to run slow and being okay with that. Because running to me was the gym class mile run, where you go as fast as you can, and if you're the last one done, you get made fun of, and the whistle's blown at you, and you get a bad grade. So it was like running has to be fast. But once I learned that it doesn't, and that it shouldn't, if you're trying to train for long distances, 70, 80% of your miles should be at a very, very slow pace, like conversational. You can carry on a conversation without difficulty. That's how slow you need to be running. And most runners do not do their easy runs slow enough. So that was one of the keys. And the other one was to take 180 steps per minute, roughly, which is 3 per second. So that's a fairly quick turnover rate. But once I started doing that, so much changed. It makes so much of the rest of your form fall into place. So that's a big key. And if anyone has questions about that, as people often do, I'm happy to get into that at the end. But anyway, with this new running, with these new tools I discovered, I was able to run a second marathon within 2 years of that, and started making progress, steady progress towards Boston, taking off 15 minutes here, 10 minutes here, and just improving very quickly. Finally, I got to about 3:20, 3 hours and 20 minutes, where I was now 10 minutes shy of my Boston goal. And right at that same time, I started to kind of plateau and feel like I wasn't improving very much anymore. I'd come all this way, and this 10 minutes that was left was like an eternity. And at the same time, I got this urge that I, at the time, considered to be a major inconvenience, the ethical urge to become vegetarian. I just stopped feeling right about eating animals, and really didn't have anything to do with performance. In fact, this was 6 years ago now. So there wasn't the stuff out there that there is now. It just wasn't a big thing. And to me, going vegetarian meant giving up protein, giving up calories, and basically giving up on this Boston Marathon goal. And by the way, I'm now vegan, been that for 3 years. But back then, I didn't even know that vegan was a thing. It was just, stop eating meat was what I thought it was. So because I wasn't making that much progress towards Boston anymore, I finally had this, I was kind of doubting it. I was saying, I made it this far, but I don't think I'm going to get there. Like on this current path that I'm on, I'm not going to make it. So because I hit this plateau at the same time as I had the urge to become vegetarian, I decided it was worth a shot. Like if I'm not going to get there anyway, why not just change the diet and eat the way that I feel right about eating? So I was injured at the time, went vegetarian. I had about a month off, and my first run back from this month off, my first long run back, I should say, is one that I will never forget. I'd been eating vegetarian for a month now, and I went for a 12-mile run. That was a run that I'd done all the time near my house, a route that went to a trail. It was a very nice little route, but I'd done it all these times, and this particular time was my first run since being vegetarian, my first long run back from the injury, and I was just paying attention to my knee the entire time. Didn't want it to mess up, didn't want to blow it up and get set back again. But then when I got back from the run, I looked at my watch and realized that I had done this 12 miles in 6 minutes faster than I'd ever done it before in my entire life. So very quickly, I got excited and did the math in my head and was like, wow, 12 miles, 6 minutes, that's 30 seconds per mile. If I could do that over the course of 26 miles instead of 12, that is the difference between me and qualifying for Boston. So I wish the story were more dramatic at this point and that I had all these ups and downs after that, but it just got really easy then. I mean, I trained very, very hard that summer, but I was able to put in more and harder workouts than I'd ever been able to do before. I don't know for sure that it was the diet, because I was evolving as a runner as well, but I just kept feeling like, okay, at this point the injury should be coming soon, because it always does when training is going this well and when I'm putting in all these workouts. But it never came. And that fall of 2009, 7.5 years after my 4:53 first marathon, I ran a 3:09:59 at the Wineglass Marathon and got myself in. So thank you. Thanks. And like I said, I really do think the diet was a big part of that. And if we want to get into any diet type specifics, then I'm happy to do that when we get done. But the point of this talk, is to give you some tools. And I hope, like I said, the big point is just to get you thinking that these things that we just assume aren't possible for us or are for other people, that they really are not out of reach at all. So that's the big message I want you to take. But there are some tools you can use, too, to really kind of start making progress towards things. And the very first thing you need to do after you make some sort of decision that you are going to do something that is crazy and seems unreasonable is start to build some new habits that are going to encourage you to do that. Because assuming your goal is like I'm talking about, one that's way out there, then that means you probably need to make a lot of changes to get there. So the way that I would recommend doing that is starting with your habits and changing what your automatic behaviors are so that you're not depending on willpower for the entire 2, 3, 5, 7, in my case, years that it's going to take you to get somewhere. Because no willpower is going to last that long. It just doesn't. Willpower has been shown recently to be a depletable thing in the way that a muscle is depletable. So when you overload your willpower, you try to do too much in a given day or in a given week, it will eventually run out, and it needs time to recover and rebuild. And it can be strengthened just like a muscle if you actually work it correctly and don't overload it. But it's something that you need. It's an actual thing. Like you can do a certain amount of difficult emotional labor, and at some point you cannot do anymore because your willpower runs out. So what's important to do is engineer habit change. Don't just say, okay, I'm going to become a runner now, so I'm going to start with 30 minutes a day every single day of running. Because that would be one way of saying I'm creating a running habit. But there are a lot of things you can do that are really going to make it easier. And these are not made up. These are truly based on the habit change research, which is really becoming a big thing. And it's a really exciting thing, in my opinion. So there are 3 keys that I think are really important. And we can go into way more detail with this about creating habits and starting healthy habits and changes. But the big one is to choose one habit at a time. So a lot of times what happens is, and I have been guilty of this myself many, many times, is you decide, you get inspired to make some sort of change. Maybe it's do an Ironman for the first time. Maybe it's go vegan and you're an omnivore. But something that's a pretty big change. You get inspired, and then you want to start changing everything. So like you're going to change your health, you decide. So it's like, okay, then I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to stop drinking coffee. I'm going to get up an hour earlier. I mean, just all these new changes that we start making. And the problem is, because of the way the willpower gets depleted, like I mentioned, when you pick 4 or 5 new things and try to change them all at once, you're basically depleting that willpower very, very quickly. And you're headed for some point when, this is also really closely tied to like the perfectionist attitude. And you head into some point when all of a sudden it's no longer sustainable and you fail. And then it's like, well, I guess I failed. I guess I give up on that Ironman just because this one day I drank coffee when I said that I wasn't going to. So the point is pick one habit at a time. I mean, in creating a habit, what's going on is there's a race between your willpower depleting and the force of habit, this behavior becoming automatic. So every time you do a certain behavior, your brain kind of links it up and starts to build a stronger and stronger connection, a neural pathway, that makes this habit a habit, makes it an automatic thing that's not hard to do and really just happens when it's triggered by whatever usually precedes your habit. So maybe it's you get a cup of coffee and then you go run, if that's your morning routine. And having a trigger like that really kind of reinforces this habit loop and gets the brain going. But the problem here is that your willpower is going in the opposite direction as the habit is going up. So the point is you want this thing to become a habit before the willpower runs out. And that's the big struggle, and that's the reason to choose just one habit at a time. Be patient with it. I understand that it's exciting to want to change a whole bunch of things at once. But if you would just make one change per month, and that's it, one thing at a time, 1 month each, then 3 years from now, you're talking about 36 habit changes, new behaviors. That's an entirely different person. I mean, and 3 years, goes by in a heartbeat. So that's the first big key. One change at a time, spend a month on it, and then go on to the next and maintain, the previous changes. The other big one is to start really, really small. So to continue with the example of starting a fitness program, and this also works for, say, changing your diet, going vegan or something like that. You don't want to just, like a lot of people when they say, okay, I need to get in shape, so I'm making changes. What they do is set up their gym schedule, and now they've got to go to the gym for 45 minutes 3 times a week, and on the off days, they're going to do this cardio work. And it's like, suddenly you're going from 0 to 60 right away, and that's just such a huge drain on your willpower when you do that. Because the first day is easy because you're excited about it, but then you realize it's actually hard to do. So the second day is not quite as easy, and the third's a little bit harder. And then you hit that failure point. Your friends are having happy hour, and you haven't gotten your workout yet, so you finally decide to do it, the happy hour, and then it's like your whole plan is done. So start really, really small. If you were to tell me that you wanted to run a marathon in a year and a half from now, and you're not a runner, that's not a ridiculous goal. I think that's a reasonable timeline. It's fast, but if you get the right resources, you can move through a plan and the base building and everything at that speed. But if you were to do that, I would say, okay, what you need to do is start, if you've never run before, start with 5 minutes per day of running. And that's a very, very easy thing to do. But if you find yourself procrastinating on even this 5 minutes, then you should make it 2 minutes a day. Like the tiniest possible steps that you can take. You keep shrinking it until you don't fail to do it, until you don't procrastinate. And what happens is you do a week of 2 minutes per day running, just every single day. Ideally put some sort of trigger in front of it, something that happens every single day that tells you, okay, now it's time to go run. So you do that for a week, and then if it goes well, you increase it by, up to 5 minutes or 7 minutes, something very, very small increase. And what happens here is that after a month, you've noticed almost no physical changes. And that's why this approach, just like the one habit at a time, requires a lot of patience. Because there's almost no physical difference in your body after a month of training at such a tiny, tiny amount. But the difference, and the reason to do this, is because in your brain, there's a lot going on. Now, this has become a habit. You've done something for 30 straight days, immediately following some trigger. So even though you haven't changed on the outside yet, inside you have this behavior, and this running behavior or exercise or changing your diet or whatever it is has started to become automatic. Because to run for 2 minutes requires no willpower. So you haven't depleted willpower, but you have allowed the habit to form. And that's really the basic approach. So it takes you a month or two to get going, to get up any momentum, any speed. But when you look back in a year from now or 2 years from now and you're actually still doing the habit versus someone who goes out of the gate hard and is done after 3 months because they couldn't sustain it. So those are the two really big things for habit change. And they both require patience. That's really all it is. But I think taking that perspective of, if I look back at this situation 2 years down the road and I'm still doing all this great stuff, where will I be then? So that you can kind of deal with the slow start that this kind of approach does require. And the final thing that I want to mention here before we get into the Q&A is called accountability. Many of you probably know what it is, but I think it's one of the best things you can do. And so if you have really thought of a goal and thought of something that, hey, maybe I actually could make this sort of thing happen if I made that my focus and I just, allowed myself to dream and think that it was possible. That's in your head, and that's good. And you get home and you have this thing in your head, and maybe you'll take action on it, maybe not. But you can go a step better, because when it's in your head, I mean, all it is now is a little electrical impulse in your brain. So the more you can start to bring that into the real world and create all these connections to the real world, like by writing it down is one example. Writing a goal down makes you significantly more likely to actually do it than just leaving it in your head. So that's the first tiny step you could take, bringing it out of your head into the real world in some way. But so much better than that is getting other people involved. So the simple thing to do would be go on your Facebook page or your Twitter page, say that you're going to do this goal. And that may or may not help you. It's kind of debatable whether or not that actually helps or could possibly hinder you. But that's a first step. You could start a blog about it. You could say a blog that I'm going to journal my progress towards this habit. Even better than that, though, is get other people actively involved. Like, get a partner. Get somebody who's going to be doing their own goal, who's going to agree to check in with you, who's going to agree to not let you let up. It just makes so much difference to have someone else who you are letting down or whose respect you think you are losing if you don't show up and do whatever it is that you're going out to do. I understand that's difficult, but it's really the most important thing. And in my own example, what that did was, so I was kind of silly in the way that I went after this Boston thing. Every time I trained for a new race, every time I started the training, I told myself, this is the race where I qualify for Boston. So even after that 4:53 first marathon, whenever I would start a new program, even when I was dealing with all these injuries, I said, this is the one where I'm going to qualify for Boston. So it would have been smarter, I think I would have gotten there faster had I maybe taken a little bit longer term approach and said, I'm going to get there in 2 years and do these 3 marathons to get there. But one way that kind of worked for me was that every single time I did this, I also told other people. And I know we don't like to tell other people about our goals often, because it's just like there's this huge fear of failing at them and then being humiliated, looking foolish in front of our tribe and our friends, and just feeling like an idiot for saying we're going to do this big thing and then not doing it. So we keep our goals to ourselves when in fact the exact opposite thing is what we need to be doing. And instead of letting that fear be something that prevents you from going, you suddenly, you get up, I won't say any bad words, to put that goal out in the world for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden the fear is now working for you, right? Because now that everybody knows, the fear of humiliation means, okay, I better start going and do this thing. That's how you put it to work for you. So what I would do is tell everyone, my friends, I said, I'm going to qualify for Boston in this next race. It's going to be here on this day. I would love it if you would come out and watch me, because it would mean the world to me, and I'm going to do it. So this happened 5 different times when I failed, and I told people. And after the first time, that was really humiliating, because I told all these people I was going to do this, and I looked like an idiot because I didn't do it by 103 minutes. But, so I think, though, as soon as people kind of started to go into that, make fun of Matt for dreaming so big mode, is when I signed up for another race. And that's when the real shift happened, because, we want to make fun of people, we want to criticize, see people fail. It's just what our culture does, unfortunately. But when you see someone actually that wasn't their failure, they didn't just try once and give up, they actually tried once and now they're trying again. And this, of course, is why we love those. Rocky, Rudy, which I love Rudy, it makes me cry whenever I watch it. We love those. To watch someone go after something that everyone else says is ridiculous, and when they fail, they don't just say, okay, I guess that was a bad idea, I feel silly for doing that. They just try again, and then they get up again, and they get knocked down again, and they just get up and up over and over and over again, no matter how many times they fall, because they've decided in their head, I am going to make this happen no matter what. So that's what happened to me. People started at first they were there maybe criticizing, but as soon as they realized that I was in this for the long haul and like it just wasn't an option, I was going to do this no matter what, then all of a sudden they became this huge cheering section. And it was people asking me, when's your next race? When are you going to do it? As soon as I'd finish a race, I'd get all these text messages saying how to go. And like when I talk about bringing it into the real world and making it inevitable, every race, more and more of that happened, and it just became more and more inevitable that this, there was no way out. This was going to happen. And to this day, I'm convinced that that's exactly why it did. So it's tremendously inspiring to watch that kind of stuff, to watch someone do that. I can tell you from experience that it feels even better. It's more amazing to be the person doing it and see friends, see people around you making changes and being inspired because of what you are doing. So with audiences like this, plant-based people, vegan people, runners, active people, there's so much good that can be put into the world by you guys going out there and just doing awesome things that seem ridiculous and unreasonable, but making it happen. So I urge you to go do that, put that good into the world, and just make it happen. So thank you very much. All right, so we've got a while, 28 minutes or so, till I'm out of here. If you've got any questions, please ask them. I've saved a lot of time because, like I said, the Q&A is the fun part, and people generally have a lot of questions. So who's going to be first? Where do you get your protein? No? Yes? Okay, so the question is, what made me transition from vegetarian to vegan? It was the decision to go vegetarian was an ethical one, like I said. Like I just felt wrong about eating animals. And I didn't know the extent of everything else. I didn't know that vegan was a thing. I mean, I'd heard of it, but I didn't really know what it was. When I went vegetarian is when I started my blog, which of course was a lot more accountability because by the time I had my qualifying race, there were 500 or 1,000 people watching me now. But as I did that, I started to surround myself with books and people that were involved in this. And I just realized like it's so much more than animal meat. Like the problem is so much more extensive than that. And the life of a dairy cow is in many ways worse than a cow that is just slaughtered. So I watched the movies, talked to people, read blogs, and felt like if I'm doing this for ethical reasons, I need to do it do it all the way. So it took me 2 years or so to transition. Again, transitioning very gradually has been my thing. And I just, over that period, gradually reduced all the dairy and things I was eating. And then one day, like, I was eating pizza like once every 2 weeks or something. And one day I was just like, that's enough. I'm drawing the line here. And as soon as I made the decision, it was very easy to stick with it. Because it was such a gradual change, it's hard for me to say. Like, I noticed a big change when I went vegetarian. That was different. I started eating all these fresh fruits and vegetables that I had just like totally ignored before when I was eating chicken breasts and brown rice and thought that if I get the carbohydrates and protein and fat that I need, that's all there is. Once I started eating fresh vegetables and fruits, everything seemed to change. So it was very gradual after that, so I can't say I noticed some big improvement. But what I did notice was, and still notice to this day, is that I can train for ultra marathons now and run 50 miles and 100 miles when, and I can do them within 2 or 3 months of each other, like without too much difficulty. But back then, before I was plant-based at all, if I did 2 marathons in 3 or 4 months, that would be, I'd get injured. And that's why I was injured actually right when I started going vegetarian. So when I look back over the long picture, like I get injured so much less, and I think that I can get in more workouts than I used to. I think I recover better. It's hard for me to really say that scientifically and like say, yes, this is definitely the case. But that is my impression of it. All right, good question. Other questions? So the question is, do I take any supplements? Which is a great question. The only supplement that I take is B12, which I believe that all vegans should take. Some will argue with that, but there's not too much argument with it. I like Dr. Furman, so I take his multivitamin sometimes. What I like about his multivitamin is that it's not super crazy mega doses of stuff, and I just think he's really research-based, and I like his approach. So, I want to take it from somebody I trust, and that includes the B12. Sometimes I'll kind of like go through periods where I just stop doing that and only take a B12 supplement, not really for any reason, but just because. But the interesting one is protein powder, which, of course, at first I thought I absolutely needed to have. I thought, getting rid of the protein meant disaster for marathon training. So I just wanted to have all this protein in my diet, and started to rely less and less on that. And finally, last year when I was training for the 100-miler, I actually ran out of hemp protein powder, which is one that I liked because it was really close to a whole food, not very processed. But I ran out and kind of out of laziness just didn't buy more. And it was like 3 and 4 weeks passed, and I realized that I felt totally fine, and I was training for a 100-mile run. So I started to just sort of question if I really needed it. And now it's been basically a full year and a half or so since I last used protein powder, and just haven't ever noticed any difference. So I don't think about protein really that much at all. Just eat mostly whole foods, and I really do believe that they have the protein they need in them, almost regardless of which ones you're eating. And that's really it. I used to do like oil supplements and things like that, but I've really gotten away from that and try to focus more on entirely whole foods. I still cook with oil a little bit now and then, but not too much. But that's it. No crazy supplements or anything. All right. Are there other questions? Yes. Injury prevention. So the question is, can I talk a little bit about injury prevention? Yeah, and this is actually the thing that I mentioned for me. What made the difference with my running was first learning to run slowly. And the idea here is that when you're running and you want to make adaptations, you want to stress yourself so that your body then adapts to the stress and your muscles get stronger and you get fitter and everything. So what you want in your workouts is you want to have, instead of like all your workouts being at the same level, you want to have really tough workouts, like really, really tough, followed by very, very easy workouts. And this is where people get it wrong. They don't go easy enough on their easy days. And I think this is a big part of why we see so many runners getting injured. I mean, your easy day should be, if you do a heart rate monitor, it should be like 65 to 70% of max heart rate, which for most people, if you actually put it on and try to do that, you'll realize that you are barely not walking to keep your heart rate down that low. And it's just a hard thing to do. You have to check your ego. It's very difficult to run that slowly, but it changed so much for me when I made that shift and realized that at least 3 or 4 days a week, my run should be like that, where I have more energy when I come back from that run than when I left on it, because it's such not a strenuous activity. But it's still getting those miles in and teaching your body to run. A lot of injury prevention, I think, is just, especially if you're talking about running, is just doing it for more years. Because with every step that you take, even on a very, very easy run like that, your body is learning better how it runs. Your brain is learning how to communicate with the muscles and recruit muscle fibers. And I really just think there's this connection that you just learn. You become more efficient as a runner just by getting out there and doing it. So try to be as consistent as you can. Try not to have those 6-month layoffs where you entirely forget about running. And the more hours you can log as a runner, even if they're very easy, I think that the more injury-proof you will become. And the other one, running specific related, was the 180 steps per minute thing that I mentioned. And what happens there, the reason for that idea is very similar to what made the barefoot running or the minimal running craze happen about 5 years ago. And that's that when you take steps that quickly, because 180 per minute or 3 per second is very quick. That's, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's a pretty quick turnover rate for your steps. But when you do that, it makes you take shorter and lighter and quicker strides. So all of a sudden, when you're taking strides that quickly, you don't have time to take this big, long stride where you land on your heel with your foot way out in front of you, because that's the thing that really seems to be the culprit for so many running injuries. And it's so you take these quick steps, your weight now stays over your body just because you can't get your feet out in front of you when you're stepping that quickly. And it also makes you land more on your midfoot, because this heel strike, which is not a good thing when it's kind of extreme, that doesn't really happen when your weight's over your feet. It's just hard to strike with your heel. So that's kind of what the barefoot running movement did. It made it so that all of a sudden it hurts to take this long, big stride where you crash down on your heel. It hurts to do that if you don't have shoes on or if there's very little padding there. So that made runners take shorter, quicker, lighter steps and keep their weight over their feet and land on their midfoot. So they kind of get you to the same place. I think one of the problems with the barefoot minimalist movement and why we did see a lot of injuries from runners with that was that I think a lot of people we got obsessed with the heel strike thing. And people said, okay, now I'm running barefoot. And they kind of ignored the take faster, quicker, lighter steps thing and keep your weight over your feet. And it became just don't land on my heel. So they kept the exact same stride, changed their little foot angle a tiny bit, which is, that's not a very holistic approach, I guess, to changing your running stride. It's kind of like a Band-Aid on the problem to me. So I think barefoot runners who did it correctly, actually quickening their stride and keeping their weight over their feet, probably had more success than those who didn't. So that to me was huge. Scott Jurek, who spoke yesterday, has said that taking 180 steps per minute, and that's not an exact, like if you can get in the neighborhood of that, it's totally fine. There's nothing magic about 180. But that single form change is the one that makes so much else about your form fall into place. So if you can get that down, I think you almost don't have to think about running form. And you'll very likely have less injury. It takes a while to get used to it, because it's, as I mentioned, your body learns to run with every step you take. So when you make a drastic change to that stride, which that is a drastic change, changing the speed and the length of your strides, you've not only got to rebuild muscles that have kind of been unused for all these years, but you've also got to relearn that brain-body connection stuff. That how do you run efficiently? That needs to be relearned. So it takes a good 3 to 6 weeks of doing this before it begins to feel comfortable. And even then, it might still feel weird. But it is worth it, at least for me and many other runners. It's been worth it. Yes? Yes. Okay, so the question is about a series of blog posts that I did, and they were actually sponsored posts. It's the first time I've ever done, taken money for blog posts, and I don't know if I'm going to keep doing it. But it was to try tart cherry juice as a recovery tool, basically. And what I had to do was do a 7-day challenge where I did a lot of hard running workouts and drank, I think it was 1 ounce twice per day of tart cherry concentrate. And I noticed that I did not have any muscle soreness when I tried that, and that's what the science, because a study just on me doesn't really mean very much to me. That's kind of meaningless, but they did provide me with a lot of science that seemed to be legitimate. I mean, I looked up the articles, looked at the journals they were in, and it seems that when you take runners and when you have them take that amount of tart cherry juice, they experience less muscle soreness. That's kind of the most measurable thing, and then also lessening of the markers of muscle fatigue. So it was a legitimate thing, and for me, I didn't necessarily notice that my running was that different. I mean, I did notice that I didn't get sore during this 1 week, but who knows if I would have otherwise. But what's been interesting is that I had a shoulder injury from back in those weightlifting days, but recently, for whatever reason, has kind of flared up, and this whole year has been bugging me, and I don't really take ibuprofen or things like that. I just kind of stay away from drugs for the most part like that. But as I was taking this cherry juice, once I got 5 days into the challenge, for the first night in many, many nights, my shoulder did not wake me up in the night. And I noticed that during the days, it wasn't hurting me. And like now, a month later, it feels way better than it has the rest of the year. So I think the anti-inflammatory properties, I mean, what that tells us is that, yes, there is truly anti-inflammatory compounds and properties of tart cherry juice. Does that mean it's a necessary supplement for runners? I don't really know, but I think it's worth trying. I mean, for me, I had a positive enough experience that I will, when I get back into any kind of heavy training, I will definitely add it to my routine and just see what happens. All right, other questions? Let's see what we have. A couple minutes left. A few more? Yes? Favorite thing to eat for dinner the night before a race? That's a good question. I think my favorite, and one that I have just kind of done a lot, is this Italian dish. It's like pesto, pasta, potatoes, and green beans all mixed together. And a lot of people think that potatoes and pasta is a weird combination with the double starch, but if you're going for carbo loading, then that's great for that. And it's actually a traditional Italian recipe. It's not a weird running recipe or anything like that. So I just have kind of done that almost as tradition. I don't know if it really does that much. I really have kind of begun to think recently, specifically for marathons and shorter distance running, that carbo loading at that point with a meal like that doesn't really do anything. I think your carbo loading should be done at lunchtime or previous, the day before the race. And then after that, it's really got to be liquid carbs or sugar to get, if you want it to get quickly into your bloodstream in time for that race. So the carbo loading dinner is kind of, not really a valuable thing, or I think more often it probably causes problems because people eat some crazy dinner that they never would have otherwise eaten and then don't sleep well, and then the next morning they have all kinds of nervousness and all other problems. So, it's not a coincidence that I do the same thing every time, because I figured out that it works well enough for me, and then I don't want to change anything. Yes? All right, the question is, how do you keep your brain occupied during long races? And that's a good question, because it's actually not as much a problem during races for me as it is during training. The limiting factor for me as a runner is boredom. Like, I am not someone who loves every minute of being out there. It's definitely work for a payoff and for a goal. So when I'm training, I listen to all kinds of things, podcasts, audiobooks, and I think that's a really good use of time for me, like to get out there and be active and moving, and also listening to something that is inspiring or educational. I really like that experience, especially since I have 2 kids at home who are 4 and 1, and I don't get that kind of time otherwise. So I do that. It helps me get it done. I listen to music sometimes, but not that much. During race, though, somehow, like during the 100-miler, I almost didn't listen to anything. I was just so excited to be there and to be doing it that I don't really know what I thought about the whole time, but I didn't ever really feel that bored. It was just this, I don't know. I was just so caught up in this thing that I was doing, this scary thing for me, and it went. It was fine. Didn't have to occupy my brain otherwise. Yes. Do I have any songs? Oh, with the pace, with the 180 thing? Yeah. So when I was doing all this, it was before you could Google 180 beats per minute songs and find like 1,000 suggestions. So I actually had to count the beats with a song and figure it all out. And there was a song called Cliffs of Dover. It's a guitar song. There's no vocals, which actually makes it kind of nice for running because you can just put it on and zone out. So it's called Cliffs of Dover. It's by Eric Johnson. He's a well-known guitar player. And it's a good song, and it's right around 180, so that worked really well. Still, I'll put it on now and then and just kind of make sure that I'm still in that range. But really the way that I mostly did it was got on a treadmill and just stared at the clock. And I don't like treadmill running, but back then I did it for 20, 30 minutes at a time, and just make sure that every 3 seconds I was landing on every 1 second tick, I would land on my 4th step, meaning there would be 3 in that previous second. And I just did that. It wasn't fun, but I did it for 2 or 3 weeks for 30 minutes at a time. And that worked well. Another thing you could do, to make any kind of form change like that, is break your run up into 5-minute sections and do 30 seconds of the new form for every 4.5 minutes of your old form. And then over the course of a few weeks, increase that to 1 minute out of every 5 minutes, and then 2 minutes, and then 2.5 minutes out of every 5. So eventually, most of your running becomes the new form. That has worked well for me, and it might be better than drastically trying to change your form all at once, just for injury prevention reasons. Yes?
Do you have any interest or comments on a Fruitarian approach to endurance?
All right, so the question is, do I have any interest or comments about a Fruitarian approach? I think it's really interesting. And I don't really love raw diets. I think it's cool. I've never really tried it myself, so I can't say that it doesn't work for me. But I've mentioned Dr. Furman, who I like a lot, and I think there are benefits to both cooked and raw food, so I tend to try to have a good mix of them. But I do think having a lot of raw food in your diet is crucial. I don't know if it's important that it be all raw. I am going to Woodstock Fruit Festival next week in New York. All right, first week or second week? Yeah, so I'll be there that whole week with my family, giving a talk and doing some runs and stuff. So that'll be the first time that I or my family, including 4-year-old and 1-year-old kids, have done a raw diet for any amount of time, much less a fruitarian one. But I think what Mike Arnstein has done is incredible, and I know there are other really good athletes too, and I've heard a lot of people tell me, ever since I started writing that I was going to be at this fruit festival, I've gotten a ton of emails from people who said, yeah, I tried fruitarian for a while, I'm not fruitarian anymore because the lifestyle was too hard, but the difference for my running was huge. How quickly I recovered, they said, is just such a big difference. So Mike Arnstein, by the way, for those who don't know, is the fruitarian, is what he's known as. He's run a 100-miler in something just under 13 hours, which is 7:45 or something pace, the 7th fastest American 100-mile time. And he eats raw fruits and vegetables and nothing else. Doesn't eat nuts and seeds very much, not even raw, because it's fruits and vegetables is what he does. So I think it's really cool and intriguing. I don't know that the lifestyle would ever work for me, but I haven't really tried it, so I don't know. I'm looking forward to trying it next week. All right. So we still got a few more minutes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So the question is, what's my next big goal? I did the 100-miler last summer. I didn't. My time in the 100 wasn't quite what I had hoped. I tried to not make the goal the time. I tried to make it just finish the 100-miler. A lot of friends said you really should just do that because if you have a time goal and it starts slipping away, that can often make you just get so depressed and like there's enough depression to worry about in a 100-mile race that you could just, I mean, middle of the night, 70 miles in, trail and by yourself, like apparently you hit some very low places, which I managed to avoid. I guess I was smart. But I'd like to do one in 24 hours. Mine took 28 hours. So that's probably the next thing I will do. I would love to do Badwater one day, which is the 135-mile through Death Valley, which a lot of runners don't want to do that. Even ultra runners like think that doesn't seem like a fun one. But for me, that just seems so much more fun than like a mountain 100-mile Western States type of race. So Badwater has always just been something that I'd love to do one day. I don't really know if I ever will, but you need to do 300 milers just to apply. So I'll have to do 2 more, at least to apply. So that's kind of like what I think will be next, but I've kind of learned that I do better. I don't like forcing myself to choose another big goal. I kind of like let it happen. I used to tell people after you run a first marathon, or before you run a first marathon, sign up for the next right away, because that'll keep your motivation going. But I've learned that that's not really a good strategy for me, at least, because if I force that on myself and make myself sign up for something, then it doesn't have that same drive and meaning behind it. Like if I'm not motivated to run, it's because there's no goal that's pulling me and really inspiring me to go run. So I don't know what's next. I'm kind of waiting. A 3-hour marathon would be really cool because I did the 3:09 and then got into ultra running and have slowed down a lot as a result. So it would take me a while to get back to 3:09 even, but 3-hour marathon would be cool. But I don't know. These are all kind of like wishy-washy. I'm just waiting for that one where like it just hits me and I spend the whole day on the internet reading about it and obsessing over it. That's when I know it's real. So I'm not sure right now. Yes? Question is, do I do any cross-training or other forms of exercise besides running? When I was training to qualify for Boston, I did a lot of like core work. There's a book called Core Performance by a guy named Mark Verstegen that I thought was great. It involved like rubber bands and kind of things you could do at home, but a lot of really good movements that were similar to running movements, and I felt like I was my strongest as a runner ever when I was doing that. Nowadays, I don't. I really just do the running, and I feel like for ultra running and for my goals, which are not to be a blazing fast Mike Arnstein or Scott Jurek, but just to go do these crazy things, you know, I don't think I really need that. It doesn't. I don't know that it would improve my performance very much or help me reach my particular goals. But I think it's if you're trying to run fast for like a marathon or shorter, I think strength training, especially for core workouts, is super beneficial, crucial. All right, I think we should probably wrap it up. In 3 minutes is going to be Heinrich. Heinrichs is his name, and his company is called AfriCrops. And his company, they sponsored my travel to come here. So if you want to stick around and see them, they it's this new African plant that they've been drying and grinding, and it's high in protein and iron and antioxidants and anti-inflammatory stuff. So it's a very interesting thing, and I hope some of you will stick around and listen to him and tell him thanks for bringing me here. So thank you all very much. Oh, and I'll be signing books in the back for a while.